Hello. The title of my message today is The Price of a Barrel of Oil. Both sets of my grandparents came to Ector County back in the 1940s. And the Gores have been represented here in Ector County for almost 80 years. Naturally, being a native Odessan, and at the age of 16 during the summers, I began work at my uncle's oil field related business, production, engine service, and supply. I've worked my entire life in oil field related businesses up until the last 10 years. And I've had a myriad of relatives living in the area that have benefited in different oil field related businesses and saw them go through numerous busts and boom cycles. We all know that this oil business is cyclical. Ever since its beginning in the 1850s, there has been a vicious cycle of swings from $100 a barrel of oil to the point you can't give it away like we saw last week. Although most of these swings are similar to the 2014 downturn, this one is somewhat different and cannot be grouped with the previous. Even though we have seen trends in 2019 that showed a downturn, there's no doubt that mid-March and the Russian-Saudi oil petroleum price war, along with the Wuhan virus, was the trigger for what we're experiencing now. A 40% downturn in the demand for diesel, jet fuel, and gasoline. I've seen it happen numerous times in my life. There is an obvious cause and effect on businesses and jobs and the overall economic welfare of the Permian Basin as a whole. Great uncertainty abounds, but never has there been such a noxious cocktail that is happening now with the addition of the pandemic. We see oil field related businesses laying off workers and the owners with very difficult decisions knowing that they're affecting the livelihoods of their employees. There are business owners who are making difficult decisions as to how much money they can afford to bleed before they have to close the doors. Back in the 1970s, my brother had a thriving machine shop business with multiple locations, and in a matter of a year, lost it all. And we know everything that is oil field related in our area and is affected by the downturn, even to the smallest of businesses. And everything rises and falls, booms or busts, on the price of a barrel of oil. There's a saying, the best made plans of mice and men go awry. And it's no different today as it was in Jesus' day. People are the same today as they were 2,000 years ago. We find people making plans for the day or tomorrow or in 6 months or at the end of another year or even further than that. Many people attempt to map out their lives when they're still in their teens, and most of the time, as the old saying goes, their plans go awry. It's not the actual planning that's an issue. We should all plan as best we can. But when we do not seek out the will for our lives, families, businesses from God, then we are making a prideful mistake. James chapter 4 is our text today, and it begins in verse 13. Come now who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will do this or we will do that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. Now, the uncertainty of this life and this world should bring us to the realization that this is the way God designed it, in order to sanctify us, to make us more like His Son Jesus, so we will place our faith and total trust in Him in everything that we do. Nothing in this world is safe from change. Nothing is 100%, except Jesus and the salvation that's found only in Him. Our future can be changed in a millisecond through a doctor's diagnosis, a microscopic virus, or the price of a barrel of oil. When we rely on the future without the inclusion of God, we are as foolish can be. Our lack of knowledge about the future is a fact none of us like to admit, so our dependence must be on the individual who holds tomorrow and that is God, and His will for His people. And that ultimate will is that they would come to a saving knowledge of His Son Jesus. Another thing our text warns us about is bragging about the future and it being a sinful act. One that at its best will make you feel embarrassed and discouraged. When we make unlearned statements as the individual in the story did, planning out his whole year in arrogance, confidence, and self, he is deemed foolish. We have no future to count on, only the future that ultimately God has for us. Somehow we deceive ourselves in making these plans apart from God. I believe it's the ultimate challenge to God when we state, I will do this or I will do that. And James, through his writings, attempts to sober these kinds of people by sharing the obvious. What is your life? It's like a vapor, there for a moment, and then it vanishes away. If this pandemic has done anything good, it has brought everyone to the realization that we are frail human beings with a specific time stamp on our lifespans, and there's very little we can do to change this. Even the blindness of youthfulness has prompted young people to take notice of the Wuhan virus. As for older individuals, it has allowed the thought of leaving this world and going into eternity has been brought to the forethought of our thinking. When there's no pandemic, we're in good health, the bank account's good, we're employed, oil is $60 a barrel. Many times we have no use for God other than to keep Him in reserve for times of crisis. And as the old preacher said, self-made men usually worship what made them, themselves. And usually their pride sets them up for a great fall. Worldwide deathly virus, a bad report from a doctor, or $10 barrel of oil can bring the reality of self-control to crash and burn. In Luke chapter 12, Jesus warns us about the future and taking it for granted. And He said to them, take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And He told them a parable saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. Could be West Texas. And he thought to himself, what shall I do, for I have nowhere to store my oil or my crops? And he said, I will do this, or I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. Now, 5 times in this very short passage, the foolish man says, I will. Do you see a problem here? He has I problems. He said, I will do this and I will do that. And Jesus called him a fool because his soul was required of him that night, and he died. The psalmist says in chapter 91, you will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. Now the psalmist just spoke of the terror of the night and the arrow that flies by day and the pestilence that stalks in the darkness and the destruction that wastes at noonday. The foolish man that Jesus speaks about obviously didn't take any of this into account. Do we? People in general see everyone else as mortal and subject to death, except themselves, thinking to be 6'6" and bulletproof. But that's where they make a mistake and don't realize their own vaporous lives. Our lives are like the glorious West Texas sunsets, filled with beautiful hues and spectacular light. But within a few moments, the display turns to darkness. And just like that sunset, we find ourselves in eternity. This is our life. We have no idea what a day will bring. Our blindness to the future should not bring speculation about what possibly could happen, but it should dictate dependence on God, who holds our future. And we don't lean on Him for understanding and guidance, we are in rebellion. And God does not reveal His plans to rebels. Tomorrow truly never comes. There's no security in tomorrow. So why should we attempt to plan it apart from God's wisdom and direction? Remember, Jesus said, don't worry about tomorrow. Today's troubles are sufficient. There's a reason that we benefit from our blindness of the future. It is hidden for a purpose. Who knows what we would do if we saw the end before the beginning? It could lead us to despair and discouragement. Or if you knew the future was as bright as the sun beginning at a certain point of time in your life, you would be discontent prior to that point. Or any number of scenarios. That it would be harmful to know the future. That's why I believe it's a sin to read horoscopes and such. All of these things show a contempt for God and for His will for you. And believe me, I can empathize with those that would have troubling questions about what I would say today. But I would share with you that as of 2 weeks ago, I'm currently unemployed and searching for God's will in my own life and direction. It would be easy for me to question why things happened the way they did, but then I would not be trusting in the one who holds my future. And again, it's a difficult position to be in, 58 years old in this work environment and be unemployed, but I know He holds the future in His hand. And He has a plan for me, even if no sign of the plans at this time. It's called faith, and I pray God will give me more faith to trust in Him in everything I do and every decision I make. We must also have the same trusting faith, even in the midst of a pandemic, unemployment, and sub-zero oil prices. For those that know me and know me well, know that I use the phrase Lord willing a lot. Not only because the passage and the truth and wisdom that lies within, but because it continues to give me insight and remembrance of how He knit me together in my mother's womb, how He birthed me and raised me by my parents in His love and admonition, how He saw me go astray as a young adult and back to Him at age 27, how He's given me 3 God-fearing sons and daughters and a wife that loves me and partners with me in ministry. And I could go on and on about how God has ordered my steps and caused me to go in different directions, all for His will and for His purpose. If I would have known the future, I would have truly messed things up. Even though at times I can remember desiring to know that future. When we acknowledge our plans, whether it's audible or in our thoughts to say, Lord willing, it allows for several important beliefs to take place. The greatest one disarms our pride by plainly stating that it's God that holds my future and looks after my welfare. It is a caring and loving Father that directs me in His paths of righteousness and safekeeping, even down to the most minute detail in my life and the life of my family. It also acknowledges our great need for God's hand of providence in our lives. And one of the greatest benefits is the fact that it brings calm to the madness of the moment, something that we all desire and probably need more now than any time in our present history. The thought of Lord willing allows us to bow humbly before our Creator and strips away our self and pride. And why would we not want to walk humbly before our loving God? The only reason is pride. Not realizing what God has already graciously given us, but we like to think of those as our own accomplishments and steal the credit from the one who deserves it all. Remember that self-made men tend to worship self. We have to learn to be still and know that He is God. To listen to that small, still voice, to heed those impressions from the Holy Spirit, to search out God's scriptures for the answers to the questions that are before us, to pray without ceasing for even the smallest of questions. God never tires of our questions, no matter the perceived importance. Cast all your care upon Him because He cares for us. should be our constant thoughts, no matter the price of a barrel of oil. Jesus tells us in the very next verse from our text, do not worry, and gives us the reason why. So we ask ourselves the questions, what is your life? It's like a vapor that appears for a little while and is gone. Before we attempt anything, we must prayerfully plan and inquire of God. We must remember our time on earth is very short, and the only thing that will count in eternity is what we have done for God through the power of the Spirit and in His Son's name, Jesus. So make a concerted effort to do the work of evangelist as God says, and focus on the eternal instead of worrying over the price of a barrel of oil that will change tomorrow, Lord willing. Thanks for listening. I pray you would like and share this message with your family and friends. If you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to contact me. And may God bless you and your family during these times of uncertainty as you rest in our Lord Jesus Christ, the author and the finisher of our faith. May God bless you. Thanks for listening.